first thing I noticed was the sound of heels scraping against hardwood as the room went dead silent. Every laugh, every murmur, every clinking glass, gone. A woman near the dessert table pressed her hand to her mouth, and there she was, standing maybe 15 feet away from me, pale as a sheet, her champagne flute tilting dangerously in her grip. Sarah Collins, my college best friend, the woman who disappeared into the night with my boyfriend 3 days before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. The glass didn't even shatter dramatically. It just sort of slipped, bounced once, and sent pale gold liquid fanning across the floor. Nobody rushed to help. Nobody said a word. And for one bizarre, breathless moment, I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, because 5 years ago, I would have given anything to see Sarah Collins look small in a room full of people. Back then, I was the one coming apart at the seams. Back then, I was the one whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. Back then, I was the woman sitting on her bathroom floor at 2 a.m, wondering what was wrong with her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I ended up standing in a Marriott conference ballroom in Raleigh, North Carolina, watching my former best friend stare at me like I'd risen from the dead. Because 5 years ago, I genuinely believed my life was finished. And for a while, honestly, for longer than I'd like to admit, it felt exactly like that. It was the spring of 2020, and I was 36 years old and finally getting married. Not in a reckless, head-over-heels kind of way, in the careful way, the deliberate way, the kind of way you approach things when you've already made enough painful mistakes to understand what actually matters. Daniel Voss and I had been together for nearly 3 years. He worked in commercial real estate downtown, had a warm laugh, and the kind of easy confidence that made everyone in the room feel like they were his favorite person. I should have paid closer attention to that detail. Men who make everyone feel special are sometimes very good at making no one feel special at all. But back then, I thought he was my person. The venue was booked. The caterer was paid. My mother had already altered her mother's pearl earrings so I could wear them. My best friend from college, Sarah, had flown in from Atlanta 2 weeks early just to help me get everything organized. Everything felt settled. Everything felt real. 2 nights before the wedding, Sarah came over to help me finalize the seating chart. We ordered Thai food, spread everything across my kitchen table, and laughed about old memories the way you do when you feel safe. Daniel swung by after a work dinner, kissed my cheek, made some offhand joke about centerpiece costs, and headed home. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing felt off. If someone had whispered to me in that moment that my entire world was about to collapse, I would have laughed them out of my apartment. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5:30. I remember standing by my window with coffee, watching the sky turn pink, feeling nervous in the best possible way. By 8, Daniel hadn't responded to my good morning text. By 9:30, my calls were going straight to voicemail. By 10:45, something cold had settled into my chest that no amount of deep breathing could fix. The ceremony was at 1. My bridesmaids were already getting their hair done. The florist was setting up in the venue lobby, and I had no idea where my fiancé was. At 11:15, my phone buzzed. 1 text, 3 words. I can't. I'm sorry. That was the entire message. 3 years of my life. 3 words. I kept staring at the screen thinking he must mean something else. People panic before weddings. It happens all the time. And then my maid of honor walked into the bedroom, phone in hand, face completely white. She turned the screen toward me without saying a single word. A photo. Daniel and Sarah together at what looked like a hotel lobby. It had been posted to Instagram 40 minutes earlier by someone they apparently forgot was following them both. What happened next doesn't come back to me in any kind of order. Grief doesn't work that way. It doesn't organize itself neatly into a timeline you can explain later. What I remember are fragments. My hands, the phone on the floor, my mother's voice from the other room, someone asking whether to call the venue, and then me standing up. Because no matter how completely your heart is disintegrating, there are still phone calls to make. There are still guests who need to be told. There are still vendors who don't particularly care what you're going through. That's the part people never warn you about. Heartbreak doesn't pause the logistics. I spent the next 5 hours on the phone repeating the same sentence in different ways until the words stopped feeling like words at all. My aunt drove 2 hours to sit with me that night. She brought her dog and a bottle of wine and didn't try to say anything meaningful. That might have been the kindest thing anyone did for me that entire week. The venue kept the deposit. Of course they did. My wedding dress hung in my closet for 3 months before I finally asked my neighbor to take it somewhere, anywhere, because I couldn't keep walking past it every morning. I moved apartments. I started therapy, twice a week at first, then weekly once I could breathe again. I cut my hair short. I deleted social media. I learned, very specifically, which coffee shops in Raleigh I could go to without the risk of running into either of them, because it turns out rebuilding yourself requires some amount of geographic strategy. But slowly, not all at once, not in any satisfying, dramatic way, just slowly. Things changed. I started a small content production company. Corporate videos at first, then small documentaries, then branded campaigns for regional businesses. It was never glamorous. It was just work that was mine. Work I built from nothing at a time when nothing was all I had. And after everything I'd been through, owning something real felt like more than enough. 5 years went by, and then one afternoon, a glossy postcard arrived in my mailbox. Davidson University, class reunion, 10-year anniversary, October 2025, Raleigh Marriott Conference Center. I threw it away. Then I dug it out of the recycling bin later that night because a question I didn't like kept circling in my head. Was I still hiding? Was I still rearranging my life around 2 people who had already taken enough from me? That question bothered me more than the reunion itself. So I registered, and then spent the following 3 weeks quietly regretting it. The night of the event, I sat in my car in the hotel parking garage for 11 minutes. My hands were on the steering wheel, and I was having a full conversation with myself in the rearview mirror. Eventually, I said out loud to no one but me, "You are not the woman who sat on that bathroom floor anymore. You went and got up." Then I got out of the car. I had no idea that by the end of the night, the entire room would know the truth about Daniel Voss, or that Sarah Collins would be standing in a puddle of spilled champagne, staring at me as though she couldn't quite believe I existed. The ballroom smelled the way every hotel event space smells, like carpet cleaner, coffee that's been sitting too long, and the combined perfume of 200 people trying to look like they haven't aged. I stood near the entrance wearing a deep green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, holding a name tag that read Claire Hendricks, even though everyone in that room had known my face since we were 19. A few people spotted me right away. There were hugs, the standard questions. What are you doing now? Are you still in Raleigh? How are your parents? All the conversations that feel like warming up before someone finally says something real. I was grateful for the surface level, at least for a while. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Claire Hendricks, you actually came." I turned. Maggie Torres, who had run the student newspaper and possessed an almost supernatural ability to know everything about everyone. She hadn't changed much. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She tilted her head. "Honestly? A little." Then she smiled. "You look good, though." "I feel approximately 30% terrified, but thank you." She laughed. That helped. For the first 20 minutes, things were almost fine. I talked with old classmates. I looked at photos on the display tables near the stage. I found my junior year lab partner and spent 10 genuinely enjoyable minutes hearing about her kids. I almost relaxed. And then the main ballroom doors opened, and they walked in. Daniel first, then Sarah just behind him. They were dressed beautifully. They moved through the room with the kind of practiced ease that suggested they'd discussed how they wanted to appear tonight. Maybe they had. Several people greeted them immediately. Daniel shook hands. Sarah hugged necks. They performed like people who had convinced themselves the audience would always be on their side. And for a moment, watching from across the room, I felt the old, familiar heaviness settle in my chest. Then I felt it lift. because I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I was just tired of the space they'd occupied in my head. Sarah spotted me first. Her smile didn't fall. It adjusted, recalibrated. That split-second recalibration told me everything about where her head was. Daniel caught her expression, followed her gaze, and then he was walking toward me, smile already in place, of course. Claire. His voice still had that warm, unhurried quality, the kind that used to make me feel held. Daniel, a pause, the kind that has weight. It's been a while, he said. 5 years. Sarah appeared beside him, trailing a cloud of expensive perfume. Oh my gosh, Claire, it feels like forever. As though we'd simply drifted apart. As though forever was just what happened to some friendships. I gave her a smile that didn't cost me anything, because I'd stopped spending emotional currency on people who wouldn't spend it back. The conversation spiraled the way those conversations do at reunions. Other people drifted over. Daniel and Sarah performed. Sarah mentioned a beach house renovation. Daniel talked about a new investment property. They spoke in the language of people who want you to know exactly how well they're doing, which usually means they're not entirely sure themselves. At one point, Daniel looked at me with what I can only describe as calculated sympathy. Your company, it's still running? Better than ever, actually. That's good. He nodded slowly. That's really good. The way he said it, like I'd narrowly survived something, made my jaw tighten. He had a gift for making care sound like condescension. I excused myself, got a glass of water, stood near the window and reminded myself to breathe. I'd done too much work on myself to let one conversation undo it. Too many Thursday therapy sessions, too many mornings choosing to get back up. And then Daniel appeared again, just him this time. He positioned himself beside me, scanning the room like we were having a completely casual, voluntary interaction. You know, he started, I've thought about how everything happened. And honestly, Claire, he paused for effect. It worked out the way it was supposed to. I looked at him. I mean that. He glanced at me sideways. Leaving was the right call, for both of us. And then he added, quiet enough to sound private, loud enough to be heard, you probably know that by now. The room didn't go silent all at once, but I felt the nearest conversation slow down. I felt the attention shift, and I watched Daniel's expression settle into something satisfied, something that had probably been waiting for this exact moment for 5 years. There he was, still needing to win something. I let the moment breathe. Then I said, very evenly, I think you might be right. He blinked. I do know that now. I picked up my water glass. It did work out the way it was supposed to. And I walked away. I heard someone nearby exhale slowly. My heart was racing and my hands were cold, and I was honestly, seriously considering leaving. I stood near the far wall, calculating the distance to the exit, when the side door to the ballroom opened. A few heads turned, then more, and then the entire room seemed to quietly redirect its attention toward the entrance. Because walking through the door was someone I hadn't expected at all, with a small child tucked under his arm like the most natural thing in the world, Marcus Webb. I'd met him at an industry networking event 18 months ago, completely by accident. He was soft-spoken, unhurried, and had the rare quality of genuinely listening when someone else was talking. He was also a single father to a 4-year-old named Eli, who was currently wearing light-up sneakers and a miniature blazer that was already coming untucked. The moment Eli spotted me across the room, his whole face rearranged itself into delight. Claire! He said my name the way only very young children say the names of people they love, like an announcement. Like good news. He squirmed out of Marcus's grip and ran. I barely managed to kneel in time before 35 pounds of blazer and enthusiasm collided with my arms. And then, muffled into my shoulder, he said it. Mama, we looked everywhere. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something real happens in them. Not performance, just real. Someone nearby said, "Oh," very softly. I heard the distinctive sound of something slipping, something falling, glass bouncing against the floor. I looked up. Sarah Collins was standing very still beside the cocktail table, champagne spreading across the hardwood at her feet, her face completely open in a way I'd never seen before, not composed, not performing, just shocked. And next to her, Daniel looked like a man whose math had suddenly stopped adding up. I held Eli tighter. "Hey, Bug, you came. You said there'd be cake." "I absolutely did say that." I laughed. "A real one, the kind that comes from somewhere you forgot existed." Marcus finally reached us, slightly out of breath. "Sorry, he runs faster when he's excited." "Please don't apologize." He glanced toward the center of the room, read something in the air, looked back at me. "Did we interrupt anything?" I thought about Daniel's voice, his satisfied expression, the 5 years of space he'd taken up in the back of my mind. "No," I said. "Actually, your timing was perfect." The truth, I want you to understand, the part that matters most, is that Marcus didn't rescue me. I need you to hear that clearly, because too many stories let the arrival of a good man become the ending, as though everything a woman built alone doesn't count until someone comes to confirm it. My company was already successful before Marcus. My therapy was already working. My life was already mine again. What he brought wasn't rescue. He brought steadiness. He brought laughter that didn't cost anything. He brought Eli, who calls me Mama with absolutely zero hesitation, and who is currently the best thing about every single morning. That's not rescue. That's something better. Standing in that ballroom, watching Sarah stare at the champagne spreading across the floor, watching Daniel's certainty quietly collapse, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated, not exactly. What I felt was something quieter than that, something I'd been working toward for 5 years without knowing what it looked like. I felt like myself, completely, unhurriedly, unapologetically myself. And honestly, that was worth every single hard thing it took to get there.